So now we're in the follow-up step, and you heard me earlier talk about how important this was, and so many people just blow this step up. And you know how they do it? It's not because they don't establish the right personality type earlier on. It's not because they provide the wrong information in the introduce step. It's that you just don't do it. And I do not know why people don't follow up. Actually, I have a little theory, but it's never been proven. I think it's because people connect with somebody, they introduce their company, product, or service, and remember that weird feeling I talked about where it just doesn't seem to fit? People already know that when they're going to follow up in those situations that the person is not going to even look at what they have to offer, and they really don't want to talk to them about it because they're already kind of embarrassed on how it went. People are just generally afraid of rejection. I'm really not, because I've been doing this for 10 years, but we all to a certain degree have some fear there. And the thing is, if you do the connect wrong and you don't have a develop step, I think that's what causes a lot of this. So since we're doing a great job with developing our contacts now, and your introduce step just makes sense, you should be able to follow up now. So once you follow up, what are the keys here? Key one is applying the personality type. You have to determine the next step and then execute the next step. So, apply the personality type. We've done this several times, but the bottom line is you just need to figure out where the person sits. You've done that earlier on. You're just carrying that knowledge on this contact forward into the follow-up step. And again, it's not the end of the world if you get it wrong. We'll determine the next step. So basically, are we going to just follow up with this person? Are we going to follow up and close? These are the things you need to determine. Now, you're probably wondering, well, wait a minute, I don't understand, like, how can I do both in one day? Remember what I talked about in the blues, that sometimes even in the introduce step, before you even send information, sometimes the blue is already ready to buy. Sometimes even reds are. Just understand that just because you follow up doesn't mean you can't close on that phone call. And sometimes I recommend that's what people do, but again, the personality type could have an impact on that. So just understand that here, again, you could actually close somebody in this same conversation. And most of the time, the way most communication processes work in sales is that you have a phone call for a follow-up, you get the remaining questions they have from the information you introduced, and typically you provide information on that remaining questions, and then you go to the close to close a sale. In key number 2, reds and blues. How do you handle them? So we're in the follow-up. We're trying to determine where we're at, where we're going. So after the small talk, do not be the first person to say the first word. Let them talk first. Now you're probably going, what the heck? Like, what is he talking about? I'm going to tell you something. Over the years when I've taught people how to close, and this is something that I don't think I've ever even read in any sales book. I might be wrong, but I don't know where I figured this out or where I learned it. It's just something I've done, and it happened, and I started to just figure it out. With a lot of people, particularly the reds and the blues, and as I learned personality types later, I started figuring out where this worked a lot more, like where this process. If you talk first, usually you're not gonna close that person. Now you're probably going, well, we're in the follow-up step. I'm not closing them. Well, again, what did I say earlier? You need to determine the next step. You might move right into the close. So just in case your contact is ready to move forward on the business, product, or service, you need to, in the follow-up step, you need to really start treating this as a potential close situation. So Do not be the first person to talk. So you're probably going, I don't even understand how this works. Okay, you call the contact up. How you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Good day, back and forth. Everyone knows this. When you call somebody up or you talk to somebody, there's always that first part of the conversation that's basically just small talk. And everyone kind of feels when that ends. When you feel that ends, you do not be the first person to talk. Make them talk first. Listen to what they have to say and how they say it. What do they need to know right now? You need to think about these things. Okay? They might say something like, and if they do, they might say, what's next? What's the next step? What do we do now? If you hear that, go to the close step, which I'll cover in a minute. Now you're probably going, I don't know what all this is, and this just sounds like, a bunch of unknown things. This is one of those things where you're just going to have to trust my experience. I've been doing this for 10 years, and I can tell you, with reds and blues particularly, this is so critical. And I'm going to tell you, this is probably one of the most uncomfortable things you'll experience in the whole communication process. It is so hard for a person just to be quiet and allow that awkward silence to happen. But when you do, you're going to close a lot more people, particularly when it's reds and blues. Now with greens, how do you handle them? Well, after small talk in the follow-up step, it really doesn't matter if they speak first or not. I wouldn't do that with this group anyways. It may naturally be the one to say something first, because you really can't expect this group to be closed in the follow-up call. They're probably not ready, and just understand this. Now, that doesn't mean that it'll never happen. I'm not saying that. I've closed greens on the first call following the introduce step. But just understand generally that these are the people that are afraid to make a decision because they're afraid they're making the wrong decision. So the only way they get over that fear of making the wrong decision is making sure that every single question in their mind, every possibility has been covered, and that's why they need a lot of information. So you have to apply the right word track. And again, basically what I say to them is something to the effect of, I provided you some information and you and I had discussed, and have you had a chance to review what I sent you? Do you have any other questions at this point? I'm basically opening them up for saying, well, yeah, I looked at this, I need information on that, and I need to know more about this. The key here is really understanding that you need to get every detail out of them on what they want to know, because the downside to greens is they can drag the follow-up and the close process out forever, and you don't want to do that. And you want to give them their space, because they are the type of people that like their space and they like a lot of information. But you also need to balance that with moving them forward and eventually getting a decision from them. And the way you can balance that is giving them their space, giving them a lot of information, and the way you balance that is making sure you get everything from them on what they want to know. They've already had a chance to ask you questions at this point, and you want to make sure there aren't any additional questions, and you want to make sure you're in constant contact with them between this time, a follow-up, and the close call that you schedule, because they may have some questions that pop up in between then. The point is, when you move to the close, you want to make sure that you have all those questions answered. So that's why I asked this in this part of the process. Now again, yellows are not like reds and blues. They don't have to be the first to speak, and you might be, that's okay. And again, don't expect this group to be, closed on the follow-up call. They can be. I've seen it happen before. Sometimes with yellows, if you really connect with them on that emotional level, because they're that really touchy-feely group, at the end of the day, if they feel comfortable with you and they can see that you're a good person, they'll just want to work with you, and sometimes they'll make a quick decision. But generally, they need to build that kind of touchy-feely trust with you, that you're going to be, that they're in somewhere where they're going to feel accepted, and there's going to be a team, and there's going to be that environment for them to thrive in, and they want to make sure that they can help people. And the other things about yellows is I often see a lot of yellows, and this is not an exact science, but A lot of yellows have a lot of green in them for some reason, and I found that. So there may be a little bit of an analytical overlay here, and so understand that they'll tend to slow down a little bit. So here's what I would say, something to the effect of, you know, so did I send you everything you needed to look at? I just want to make sure you got everything you needed to move forward. Anything I can answer for you at this point? Any other information you need from me? You see how I'm saying it? I'm, you know, a lot kinder. I'm trying to be softer with them, helpful. The tone is helpful. The way I'm saying it is helpful. This is what really matters to this group of people. In the follow-up step, you determine the next step, whether you're in the follow-up or whether you go straight to close. So whether or not you did the follow-up and now you're closing them on a secondary call, or whether you're closing them on that same follow-up call, just know that you can execute the close in that same phone call. And I guess that's what I'm trying to make sure you have an understanding of. I don't want you to get into this rigid thing of thinking that I have to do this in different situations or different calls. It's just not really true.